Welcome to this introductory video on the Zodiacal Constellations and their prominent stars. I'm Kaylin Castell here with Eric Roth, and we are so excited to share this new online course that we're doing coming in September of 2022. And just a little bit of an introduction here. You can see that we have the constellations here and the names, they're opposite names. And there's a reason that we do that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And what we're going to be looking at are the zodiacal constellations, or the constellations where the planets move through. So you never see them in any other constellations. They're always in these constellations. And they have many stories. They have a lot of interesting things that when they marked specific ages in time, there are really bright stars in each of them. And again, this is another version of, here's the constellation and then the sign that's overlaying the constellation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We'll definitely be going in depth and why that is in the course, but you'll see a little bit more about why that is in some of the slides going forward. So do you want to take it from here, Eric?
Yeah, so this is a course that will explore the past and current understanding of these constellations, their myths and stories, and when they mark specific ages in time, along with the brightest stars of each of these zodiacal constellations and how they access their star magic. So say like maybe 3, 4, or 5 of the brightest stars, depending on what the constellation is and how bright these stars are. Also personal stars that are rising or in some significant place in your natal chart. We'll go into that, and that can invite all kinds of questions. So everybody will be able to learn their own personal stars, which will be absolutely fantastic. And then when the stars change seasonal signs, and that happens every so often when a star moves from one sign to another. It can mark a really profound a change in the storyline for this constellation and the sign.
Yeah, so here we're seeing a little bit of how this is working in the sky currently. So here's the sun at the December solstice, usually December 21st, when it's at 0 Capricorn, and it's on the plane. Here's this blue line is the plane of the galaxy. This green line is the plane of the solar system. And where these two intersect creates a galactic cross. So the sun is on the cross at the solstice currently from at least 1962 to 2034. More will be explained in the class. Also, so this is where, and this red line is the celestial equator. Where these two lines are furthest apart is where we have the solstices, and this happens to be near the galactic center. And then we've got the March equinox, where the two lines cross the plane of the solar system and the celestial equator. And then we've got the September equinox over here. So these seasonal signs and how they're interacting with the constellations, one of the things we'll be sharing about as we go along.
Yeah, so this is just an example in 450 BC where the December solstice point was. And that's, again, what, as Kaylin mentioned, 0 Capricorn. So we see that they're right at the edge of this constellation called the Goldfish. And I've outlined a few stars that are really prominent that form this wedge-shaped constellation that we see in the sky. So, but now in 2022, you can see how far it's come in almost 2,500 years. That has slid backwards, if you will, precession of the equinox. In this case, we're talking about precession of the solstice, which has slid back all the way to between the Archer and the Scorpion constellation, which is off the screen right there. So this would be, the December solstice was actually, I'm using Stellarium software for this, and December solstice was in the Goldfish itself. Again, 1930 BC to 450 BC. And I'm just kind of like in the modern, quote, boundaries, if you will, of the constellation. But again, this is relative, depending on how, or subjective to what we see in the sky, and things change over time. But we can see that the solstice point was actually in that Goldfish during the first and second millennium of BC.
Now, the star Nunki here, that's a big
Yeah.
point. That's like, we'll be talking about that more later, just so you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind that was in Sagittarius at that time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
So since the goatfish is where the December solstice was way back when, we thought one of the things we're going to be doing is telling the stories and things that are connected to each of these constellations. And so, of course, there's stories about how there's different ways that it's told, but one is that Zeus was trying to get away from the monster Titan and he was a goat running across the land, and he jumped into the water and was trying to turn himself into a fish, but he was moving too fast. So he's only a goat and a fish, a tail of the goat. But anyway, some think that the two goats of Yom Kippur represent the dual nature of Capricorn, the climbing goat. As you can see, this goat, like, I can't even believe that goat is climbing there. And then the sea goat, or the one that swims in the water. And for Yom Kippur, they would sacrifice one goat, and then they would allow the other to escape into the wilderness. And it was symbolically carrying all the sins of the community. And that's where the word scapegoat comes from. So it's really fun to learn these things about how the constellations are really helping to inform our understanding of where things come from. And so, of course, scapegoat is someone who is selected to bear the blame for any calamity that's been happening. And this constellation is perhaps the stories connected to it is where this originates from. And then the escaping goat is also related to the theory that Capricorn is the gate of the gods, where one escapes from this life. And that this really comes from the Chaldean and the Platonist philosophy. Now, I'm showing here on this wheel, here's the goatfish, the constellation of the goatfish, and here's the constellation of the crab. And you can see they're exactly opposite each other. And so the Chaldeans and the Platonists felt that the crab, also known as Cancer, but it's not the sign of Cancer because that's the June solstice when the sun reaches zero Cancer. It was the gate of the men, or the gate of men, or the entrance point where souls descend from heaven into human bodies or into creation. There's also other places in the sky where that's happening, and we'll be talking about that in the class. And it's opposite the goatfish constellation, also known as Capricorn, but it's not the sign Capricorn, it's the constellation, because Capricorn is no longer in that constellation. The seasonal sign of Capricorn is no longer in that constellation. So this represents the gate of the gods, where souls of the departed ascend back to heaven. And so it's these are the things you can see there's 12 constellations. We'll be telling the stories of all of them and getting a deeper understanding of the energy and the information that comes from these constellations, and how myth and symbol change over time when the seasonal signs move into different constellations. It'll be really fun. So now Eric's going to share with us how you can figure out your personal star.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. This is another night sky map that shows at the time that I was born, there in November 25th, 1971 in LA at 9:50 a.m. Well, this is 9:50 a.m. I was born 5 minutes before, but we can see on the diagram, I've got circled on the bottom the star Nunki, which is, I believe it's the brightest or one of the two brightest stars in that constellation. And that was a star that was rising at the time that I was born. And so that is, that's about 12 degrees Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn in the Archer constellation. So we see that constellation rising, but we see the sign there. And that is in the form of astrology that we work with, shamanic astrology. It becomes the leading edge of who we are becoming in this life as a beginner, as the dawning of ourselves, rising up over the eastern horizon. And so this is what we look to when, and in fact, in ancient times, that when we're talking about rising sign, that is really the origin of the word horoscope. It came from that. And so stars were also part of that, including obviously with the sign itself, the seasonal sign itself. So this is these could be stars of magic and alchemy that are coming up over the eastern horizon were born, and everybody's got something. And doesn't some of them may not necessarily be quote on the directly on the ecliptic, like Nuki is very close to the ecliptic. There are others that might be off the ecliptic, and that could be something that we can also discuss during the class itself. There's the ecliptic right there that Caitlin just highlighted and yellow.
Yeah, and of course we feel like the personal stars can be anywhere. They can be way off the ecliptic, but the most personal will be the ones closest.
Yes.
And also ideally the ones rising at the time you're born. So yeah.
And here's a example of my own chart here and showing where Nuki would fit into on the right hand side of the wheel. You see my Capricorn ascendant there, and then there's Nuki only about 2 degrees difference from my ascendant. So anything within 6 degrees is typically the orb, if you will, that is determining factor whether whether it actually is your personal star or may not be per your personal star, or some other area of your chart might be connected to that star. So that's a kind of a round measurement for that. We talk about that in our Bohemian Star webinar series that Kaylin and I did back in 2021.
Yes, beautiful. Now, this is a table that's showing, these are the stars of the Pleiades. Now, the Pleiades is not a star, it's a constellation, it's an asterism of, there's 7 main stars, but when you look even closer, there's a lot more. But these have been moving from the sign of Taurus, that where it was for like 2,160 years, to the sign of Gemini, but they're not all there yet. But in fact, in 2022, Maya is moving into 0 Gemini. And then by 2041, they'll all have moved in. The next one will be Tejeta that moves in 2030. And then Solano moves in 2040. So we'll be talking about, there may be other stars that have moved or will be moving into new signs, seasonal signs. So the constellations are the backdrop that the seasonal signs move through. And it's really fascinating to get this information at a deeper level. So anything to add to that, Eric?
No, just, this is part of these kinds of activities with the way the Earth wobbles and creates this dynamic where stars move into signs over centuries and millennia. This is just another piece of part of the defining age in which we live in.
And it's because we're on the Earth, because from other places in the cosmos, we might not be having the same experience, but because what we're looking out into the sky and how we experience seasons on the Earth, that's why this is happening. So we would love to have you join us for this magical offering. You can go to mystaralchemy.com, and I think on the main page, there's a link to the actual details of the class. But you can also go to the in the show notes on the YouTube channel. You can go to the direct link and go right to the page. So if it works for you, we're going to be starting in September. We've had so much fun with the Bohemian Star class. We are offering a bundle if you haven't done the Bohemian Star class, to be able to do that for an even better tuition rate. And we have an early registration rate, and we're just very excited to share this with you. So
thank you all for being here. We're excited about this class. Thank you, Kaylin, for helping put together this presentation, and we're looking forward to seeing you all in September.